Welcome back to Invest Global. Today we're going to be taking a look at HDFC Bank of India. Now, this is a stock that I've been very interested in for some time now, and I'm excited to bring this to you from a fundamental perspective, and we will talk a little bit about sentiment and some technicals here in the charts, including what's been going on with India's currency, their current pandemic situation, what's going on with the actual cases, and a lot of other things. So the thing you want to understand about what is going on in India, and one of the, I think, most macro things that a lot of people forget is just, the overall numbers. This is why I love to travel to different countries. And I think right now the sentiment on India is very negative. For example, I'm currently here in Georgia in the Eastern Bloc in Tbilisi, specifically the capital city. And when you go to enter the country, one of the things they say is most countries can now enter. But if you've just been to India, even if you just had a layover in India, you cannot come in. So this is one of those things where a lot of other countries are doing this. And I think an important thing to keep in mind is these cases have been on the decline, but there's all this kind of negative, again, sentiment around India as a whole and kind of their handling in these later stages of the pandemic, of how they've been handling the situation. But the thing that I was going to talk about was this population situation, right? So when you're looking at banking, one of the most important things to think on is, okay, you have fractional reserve banks. Obviously, this HDFC Bank is a private bank, right? So the number one bank in India is obviously the actual government's bank, the government of India's bank. I can't remember the exact name, but they aren't necessarily a competitor, right? It would just be like, in the U.S., think about, or whatever your country is, think about, okay, a government-based, like a quote-unquote government-approved business versus a private business. Man, private businesses are always more lean and more capitalist, which I prefer so much better. When I go to a country and I look at, okay, what are some opportunities to maybe have a citizenship by investment program? For example, I talked about Dominica. One of the things with Dominica's, it's actually their investor visa, is you can either invest $50,000 in a government-approved business or $100,000 in a private business. Now, I would much rather opt for a private business just because you're kind of getting the short end of the stick. Just similar with real estate investing. If you're doing citizenship by investment, that's one of the reasons I like Turkey, is because you can invest in any real estate truly, and you can kind of break it up too. But in a lot of countries, it's kind of more of a citizenship by donation because it's government approved. It's government approved investments, and it's. I just kind of want you to frame that going into this. Okay, so the banks that are actually private versus the banks that are owned by the government. It's very important to understand the differences there. Obviously, if you watch the channel, you understand kind of my breakdown of the Federal Reserve, with the US dollar being the global reserve currency. It's important to analyze other currencies based off that, and also off gold, and then also look at inflation adjusted charts is what I kind of like to look at. But that all aside, I did want to kind of do this kind of overview analysis of what's going on with India, right? So we understand this kind of China, United States, narrative with, China's doing a lot of great things with especially with artificial intelligence, what they're doing in the computing space. It doesn't matter what political ideology you agree to. This is just objectively looking at what they're doing as far as development goes. And then in their banking sector, they're focusing on the CBDC, right? The digital yuan. So the central bank digital currency. I've done videos on this in the past, but you see, obviously, with the highest population, they're kind of taking charge there, right? So the yuan has grown over the US dollar. The US dollar, if you just look at the DXY, the US dollar index, it's continued to decline. Whereas, the Indian right here, if we're looking at the rupee, we've continued to see this rise, right? Like it's kind of just like on just an overall macro view. I mean, it has continually gained strength. I mean, it's just been completely in this rising wedge for some time now, against the U.S. dollar. And I think this is something that you have to take in mind and go, okay, wait a second. So a lot of these banks in the U.S. that people, think about, like Wells Fargo, and Citibank, Chase, all these different banks are incredibly overvalued, in my opinion. A lot of U.S. equities are incredibly overvalued. I'm very bearish long-term on U.S. equities, although, Biden can prop up this market with more stimulus. We can continue to do this, but overall, you're going to have to pay the piper at some point in time. And I think global equities, especially in emerging markets, are incredibly undervalued. And even though HDB is kind of it has been on this kind of crazy rise for some time now, I still think it's undervalued, just when you look at these numbers. So back to the population growth, where you look at, okay, what's the fertility rate? What country is actually having positive numbers? So we'll look at the yearly changes, right? So just in these top three countries right here, obviously Indonesia is a bit of a different situation, but if we're just analyzing the top three, with the United States at 331 million, India at around 1.3 billion, and China around 1.4 billion. It's just important to go, okay, purely looking at it from a statistical standpoint, who is growing more? Well, it's India, right? So we look at yearly change in China; it's around 0.4%. They have a big problem with this fertility rate in China. Again, not going to get into the politics there, but same in the United States. The fertility rate isn't all that much better than China's, right? But India, 2.2 fertility rate, and yearly changes are almost 1%. Net change is around 13.5 million people here, blowing out of the water China and the United States. And then so that's basically what the important things to look at there as far as population situation. But I did want to show you this. So HDFC Bank, as we see the rise of banking in India, the rise of digital payments, all these different things, a majority of banking in Western countries are obviously all done. Not a lot of people are just in cash anymore, right? So in India, it has been kind of a cash-focused society for a long time. In China, they're basically going cashless with the CBDC. So, okay, look at where the trend is going, then look at who's kind of the laggard in this. And I think that is India, personally. Now, that's not saying that India hasn't done incredible things. It's not saying that HDFC hasn't done incredible things, but it's looking at a growth play. So this is a growth stock, in my opinion. This is a high growth potential stock. Even though we have seen this rise, I think long term this is one where, especially since we're seeing this kind of miniature dip with HDFC. I obviously, I made this video a little bit after, but I've been able to kind of average into this one, just because I really, really like what they're doing fundamentally. I love the CEO. We'll talk about him. We'll talk about a couple other things here in a second. But we kind of saw this little bit of a bounce here on these EMA ribbons. We saw this kind of switch back here in September of 2020. And as with everything, back in March, everything kind of crashed, but it has been on this nice rise. We saw a short-term dip. I'm kind of looking for another little dip here to pick up some more of HDB. So let's go here. Whoops, this is the wrong article. I was going to look at it on Bloomberg, but Bloomberg, being the news organizations they always have to put things behind a paywall. I'm not giving Bloomberg my money. I'd rather invest it in something like HDB. So by the way, at this point in the video, I know it's been a little bit fast-paced, but let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Otherwise, throughout the rest of the video, I'm going to dig into a little bit more details, kind of the things that I'm looking at as far as what's been going on with India. As I said in the beginning, there's kind of this negative sentiment around the country as a whole with COVID cases, and right now you saw that kind of peak right there in new cases, whereas the 7-day average was around 400,000, and new cases were 400,000 on 7th of May. But now we've seen this steady decline, yet other countries have still not recognized this. And I think looking at it just from a numbers perspective, it's important to break that down. So this is an article that I thought was very interesting on just kind of the growth of banking in India. So India offers huge potential for digital challenger banks, so DCBs. But currency depreciation and local regulations are concerns for foreign investors. Now, I'm more concerned about the U.S. dollar being depreciated. We're kind of having this terrible situation where we're stimulating the economy artificially, and we're not really seeing these inflation numbers. And it's a very scary situation in the United States. That's why this whole channel is literally called Invest Global. I'm focused on diversified international equities versus just Western equities, whether it's Canada, United States, Australia. I'm not that focused on those. I'm much more focused on emerging and frontier markets. So leading consultancy BGG says in a report on Wednesday that the revenue opportunity in India, which has a population of 130 core people, was pegged at being up to 10 times higher than the rest of Southeast Asia. India regulations place significant emphasis on financial inclusion and priority sectors, which can limit the potential model and opportunity, the report said, flagging the policies as among the strategic hurdles faced by foreign entities. However, the report said not all the licenses carry the constraint, and operating as a non-bank finance company, NBFC, gives one of significant flexibility. So once NBFC gets formed, partnering with a traditional bank is the best of both worlds, it added. So in the case of currency depreciation, which supports the large number of Indian exporters, the report says considerations are true for multiple other developing economies as well. And an investor needs to look at India's attractive demographics and high growth potential. The report also highlighted that some entities perceived India as a diverse, geographically dispersed market, which leads to concerns over significant capital operational investments to build a meaningful scale. This is more a perception than a reality on a relative basis. One way to address this is to pick niches and build scale within them. It said and pointed out that small, and medium enterprise businesses, which are concentrated in 30 clusters, have a credit outstanding of USD 300 billion. And that's one of the things that I think is very important to understand with India is they're not incredibly over leveraged. So many other countries, especially Japan. I mean, you look at what Japan is doing; it's insane. Like 32x multiples on. Like if you just look at their credit system in Japan, it's ridiculously over leveraged. Based like if you're comparing it with GDP, whereas India, I showed you that massive population, yet they're not over leveraged. They're really not at all. I mean, Russia and India, as far as the banking sectors, I'm very bullish on. So in this long term, obviously short term, we will have these dips. There's always political risk. There's always currency risk. But it's one of these prices you have to pay if you're looking at investing in emerging markets and kind of being a contrarian as far as that goes. So on May 23rd of 2028, this is about the merger. So I did want to talk about this, how HDFC got so powerful. And, they got their license, I think in around 1998, it was 1995, if I remember correctly, in India. Before that, it was obviously just all government run. And then kind of as the private sector opened up, they did these more mergers, and their CEO is incredible. We will also talk about him here in a second. But so on May 23rd of 2008, the amalgamation of Centuria Bank in Punjab with HDFC Bank was formally approved by the Reserve Bank of India to complete the statutory and regulatory approval processes. As per the scheme of amalgamation, shareholders of CBOP received 1 share of HDFC Bank for every 29 shares of CBOP. Okay, so if you understand how mergers work, that's just basically the breakdown here. So it's a 1 to 29 ratio. The amalgamation added significant value of HDFC Bank in terms of increased branch network, geographic reach, and customer base, and a bigger pool of skilled manpower. And one of the things I did want to mention here with these mergers is it really put them a leg above all the competition, and still, just from a statistical standpoint, which I could maybe do another video on. Let me know in the comments if you'd be interested in that. Just looking at this from things like interest rates at the bank. I mean, the bank is way more profitable than a lot of others, and they're doing great things with this. Again, network, geographic reach, customer base, and a bigger pool of skilled manpower. Again, you have to realize the scale we're looking at, guys, right? So just look at this. I mean, so many people get so caught up in their bubble of, the U.S., we're only 331 million people. India has 1.3 billion, okay? And I still think, the banking sector is incredibly undervalued. So yeah, that's basically it for this video. I will wrap things up with this senior management, and then we can just return to the charts here in a second and look at what's going on. So let's get out of here. Okay, so this is their CEO. He's been in banking for I think like 30 plus years. 24 of that has been at HDFC, which is pretty awesome. So let's see, senior team. Here we go. Hold on one second. Yes, okay. I apologize if I get this. Okay, I thought they had a little bit more information, but I guess not. Maybe if I do a follow-up video, I can do a more detailed video into their CEO. But the CEO is absolutely incredible. He has a great background in banking, a great track record, has really made great moves at HDFC. So yeah, let's just return here to the rupee just to wrap things up. Remember, kind of the thesis around this is you see the increase in the currency, you see the population, you see all these different factors with kind of the negative sentiments. People aren't like, when people bring up the word India, kind of what's the initial reaction? Well, whenever it's a negative initial reaction, that's where I identify a perception gap, right? So the actual economy of India is doing great. They're doing great things fundamentally over the long term. But the problem is this negative sentiment, and this can actually help investors, although it's not good overall for like Indian citizens, which I feel horrible for, that they're kind of stuck there. I also see this banking sector kind of expanding to places like Sri Lanka, the kind of island off India, which I'm looking forward to visiting relatively soon. But yeah, that's basically it. As I said, HDFC has kind of bounced off these EMA ribbons, have pushed up a little bit. We could see some short-term volatility, something around these levels, like maybe we'll see a little bit higher up. maybe push down back into these ribbons, and then a further price up, maybe where we meet the top of the Bollinger Bands. And from there, I think we could see higher highs for sure. So that's basically it for this video. If you enjoyed it, let me know in the comments. Also, if you have any questions, you can either let me know in the comments or you can join the Telegram group, link down below in the description. It's basically a group of like-minded investors talking about global investment strategies, blockchain, emerging markets, commodity stocks, everything you know about real estate, whatever it is. We'll talk about it, even if it's just casual chit chat. Yeah, so that's all for this video. Again, if you enjoyed it, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel to keep up to date, hit the notification bell because it's time-sensitive content. So just to recap, let me know in the comments if you have any questions. If you want to see more videos of this kind of style of topic where I'm talking about emerging market equities. Yeah, so like, subscribe button all, invest global, and until next time.